I am Leah Montang. I am the Basil Hayde Lecturer at the Center for the Study of the United States, and I'm here just to introduce the event. My center is co-sponsoring along with the Cinema Studies Institute. I'll start with a land acknowledgement. The sacred land on which we operate has been a site of human activity for 15,000 years. The land is the territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Petun First Nations, the Seneca, the Mississaugas of the Credit River, and the nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. It is marked by a history of settler colonialism and genocide, as well as resistance. It is a site from which ongoing internal and external colonial projects are launched and extended, even as their persistence and violence is erased in dominant narratives and accounts of history, especially accounts of the present day. The territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. This agreement recognizes that we live off the same resources. It is hard to eat a collective meal together off a dish with only one spoon. Hence, protocols are put in place to ensure mutual respect and accountability to each other and the land. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still the home to Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. Our intersecting communities also include Indigenous people from other territories, settlers who have come here by choice, force, or otherwise as a result of settler colonialism and imperialism. Mere acknowledgement of land and law cannot suffice to address the process of settler colonialism and the way it has unevenly shaped life and death here, where we are. In recognition that we all have responsibility, we invite you to share this space by engaging with one another today with generosity and respect. Well, I'm thrilled to introduce this incredible documentary union. Brett just rolled her eyes. She's humble. I had a coffee with Brett last year while she was editing this film, and I hadn't been aware of it yet, and I was really, really enthusiastic to hear about it, and I really wanted the Center for the Study of the U.S. to help put on this event. So I'm glad we're here now. Amazon, the company, has, the corporation has, through technological change, concentration of capital and monopoly power, and the consolidation of market power, reshaped the consumption of goods and media, the collection and storage of data, the circulation of commodities, and so much more. I'm a geographer, and I think it matters. The reorganization of the way we buy things, watch things, the way our information is gathered and stored, doesn't just happen all automatically, and it's not only virtual. It's not ephemeral, it's not in a mystical cloud. It's a material and social process, dependent upon the organization, exploitation, and discipline of human labor. It's a material process secured through vast logistical networks of digital as well as physical infrastructure, including trucks, distribution centers, server farms, and more that regulate the transnational flow of goods and information. So this film, Union, charts how working people have taken on that behemoth that's reorganized our geography, taken on Amazon with its monopoly power, its logistics capabilities, and they've taken it on in a labor struggle that captivates our hope and imagination. In 2022, the workers of JFK 8 Amazon warehouse in Long Island, New York, voted to unionize under the Amazon Labor Union. The filmmakers, our own Brett Story, as well as Brooklyn's own Stephen Mang, captured this process and what led up to it. The film won a special jury award for the art of change at the 2024 Sundance Film Festival and has been recognized at a number of documentary festivals, including being an official selection at Toronto's Hot Docs. I'd like to introduce Brett. She'll say a little bit, and then we will roll the film. So here's Brett's story. University of Toronto assistant professor of what? Cinema studies? documentary film, an award-winning filmmaker, a geographer like me, a writer. Her films have screened in festivals around the world, including CPH Docs, the Biennale, South by Southwest, True False, Sheffield Doc Fest. Her 2016 feature documentary, The Prison in 12 Landscapes, which was how I first encountered her, was awarded the Special Jury Prize at the Hot Docs Canadian International Documentary Fest, among other awards. Brett's 2019 documentary, The Hottest August, was also a major award winner. The New York Times Critics' Pick was broadcast on PBS. And I've already gestured to what an amazing year Union has had. Brett is also the author of the book Prison Land, Mapping Carceral Power Across Neoliberal America, and she holds a PhD in geography from the University of Toronto. Brett, come on up here.
Thank you, Leah, for that really beautiful introduction. And yes, I love cinema studies and geography equally. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for coming out to this screening. We've been on a tour with this film all year, but it's actually hasn't played Toronto very often. It hasn't played since the Hot Docs Festival, so it's really wonderful to bring it back home, especially here to Innis Town Hall, where I also teach. Today was the last class of the term. Some of my students are here. I hope they'll go out for drinks and food afterwards and take a much-needed break. But it is really wonderful to be able to share the film with my community, with my colleagues, with my students. And I want to thank the Center for the Study of the United States, the Cinema Studies Institute, to Denise especially, Denise Ng, to all the staff here at Innis Town Hall, to Chang, the amazing filmmaker, one of my favorite filmmakers working in Canada, who's going to do the Q&A with us. And I'll just say a couple of things before the film starts. First of all, I do want to acknowledge that it is a hard time, at least for me, to be making films and to be teaching students about the value of images. And I think it's important to admit that. Many of us are personally affected by the genocide being inflicted in Gaza and the bombs raining down in Lebanon. And even if we're not personally affected, we exist together on a planet where such violence can happen, seemingly unabated, despite an avalanche of images. I don't entirely know what to say about this brutality at this moment, except to acknowledge it, except to acknowledge 416 days, and to say out loud and explicitly and in the spirit of the amazing organizers that you're going to see on screen that we need a ceasefire and an arms embargo immediately. And I think that for some of you that might feel like it's unrelated to the film, but for me the film is about political courage. It's about the privilege of witnessing a group of organizers who were told, worker organizers who were told that it was impossible, it would be impossible for them to take on $1 trillion company and win, and then did that anyway and proved everyone wrong. And making a film, there's many reasons to make a film, but for me, especially in my lower moments, is really about the opportunity to be close to people who are taking tremendous risk and showing the kind of strength and courage that I hope for in my own life. And so I'm excited to share their struggle with all of you, and I hope that their strength will feel as contagious in this room as it was during the 2.5 years that we spent filming with them. So please stick around after the screening so that you can be here for the Q&A and ask questions and offer comments after the screening. I'm excited to hear what you think. Thank you.
I happen to be a current Amazon worker at JFK 8. The pay and the work conditions are totally a nightmare. They expect you to do 200, then after that they want you to do another 3, and then they want you to do another 4. They think that we're fucking robots.
Starting today, 8,000 Amazon warehouse workers on Staten Island will begin voting on whether they want to form a union.
You sign up, man, get a free plate, contribute to our movement. We can all help. When's your next class?
Mine is now.
So you need to put the game down and find out how to get in there. We got to continue to fight because this company has not been held accountable.
Is Chris Smalls. He was fired when he went outside and protested.
You make Amazon $638 million a day. It's time we get paid our fair share.
Cancel all your plans unless it's family related. They ain't family related, we at the tent. Like, we got to. There's nothing that can stop our momentum. The only thing that's gonna stop us is if we stop ourselves. Right now, Amazon is on their high horse, and we want to punch them in the face.
We should just go in, occupy that training room, and don't even let them hold the meetings.
Can we talk outside?
Hey, you know that's illegal, right? You're not supposed to be doing that.
This is the long haul, right? This is the marathon.
This is our shot to make things better.
2 minutes, you can be arrested. What?
Huge. You know, the eyes of the world are looking at you right now.
No, you ain't seen nothing yet. It's just getting started.
Thank you all for sticking around. We're going to invite Brett up for a conversation with Young Chang. Young is a, let me get my notes back up, multi-award winning filmmaker from Canada. He's made documentaries. You may have seen Up the Yangtze, China Heavyweight, The Fruit Hunters, This Is Not a Movie, or Wuhan. He's also a screenwriter. Yeah, he's getting into screenwriting, and his films have premiered at all the, amazing international film festivals: Sundance, Berlin, Toronto, IDFA. Fun fact, he was invited to become a member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, which is the Academy Awards. So, yeah. So is Brett now. And congratulations to both of you. Come on up, Young and Brett. Yeah.
Well, firstly, thank you again, Brett, making this remarkable historic film. Historic film in that it is a historic moment that you captured in real time. And I guess what I'd like to do with the time we have is maybe take about 15 minutes to talk about the filmmaking process, and then most certainly open it up to you, the audience, to dive into other questions and labor struggle queries and comments as well. But I think I'd like to dig into that filmmaking side of it a little bit and get to hear from you a little bit your process and how you organize a film like this, how you direct a film like this, and yeah, I'd like to know more of that.
Sure, thanks. Is this on? Can you hear me?
Not yet. Is it on? Here, use this.
I don't know. Oh, that's definitely on. Thanks to all of you for staying. It's really nice to see so many people, and thanks, Young. It's great to be in conversation. Yeah, so I primarily make nonfiction, but this is the first time I've made an observational film, otherwise known as a verite film. And I'm a person who I think goes into a film feeling like the film in part teaches you what form it needs to take. And with this project, it started out with the producers having made contact with Chris Smalls. He was in the news for having led this walkout that you hear about in the film, and was at that point leading a set of protests around the United States at Jeff Bezos' various mansions. And they contacted me because I had made a short film called Camper Force, which is a sort of documentary version of the film Nomadland. It was in collaboration with the author of Nomadland. And I was really interested in making a labor struggle film because my first film was a film called Land of Destiny, which was also a labor struggle film, but it was in a way a film about 40 years of labor decline. I made that film in the mid-2000s, and I went into this community in southwestern Ontario imagining that I was going to make an observational portrait of a set of workers politicized by a health crisis. And instead, it became a portrait of a kind of a different kind of crises, a crises of of labor decline, union powerlessness, and kind of the threat of obsolescence. This, a community where the folks were really worried that the economy was going to be in decline and that the community would be deindustrialized. So, you know, when the producers made contact with Chris and they started conversing with me, I met up with Chris and folks at the JFK site, and immediately what was interesting to me before they even started the union struggle was that they were just even showing up to each other. So there's just a basic question of like, how do people become politicized? Who shows up to struggle? And the fact that Chris had sort of amassed this like group of people that were showing up on these Zoom calls, like you see at the beginning of the film, and just saying like, I heard about this call, I can't get anyone on the phone at work to talk to, and I'm hoping someone here can help me. And this just sort of informal mode of solidarity. And it felt to me at that moment that regardless of what kind of political action would happen, that there's something in the kind of fabric of people showing up to each other in a context where nobody ever shows up for anybody and nobody's taught to show up for each other. And that would require an observational approach that, you know, that maybe there would be no drama, maybe there would be no election campaign. Certainly I didn't expect that the unionization effort would succeed. And in fact, when we started the film and they decided to start a union, I assumed wrong that they would lose. And my first sort of creative strategy was to think, okay, well, we'll start the film with this loss and we'll move backwards in time so we get that out of the way and we can watch the film in new terms. But it always felt very clear that this film should be a film that pays sort of close and intimate attention to just the idea of a group of people spending time to each other and learning in real time what it means to do anything collectively, because nobody teaches that to us. And so, yeah, there was a just decision to spend an enormous amount of time with the camera on, with the microphones on, and amass, in the end, something like 900 hours of footage.
It was 900 hours, was it?
Yeah, I mean, we're always sort of fudging the number because we stopped counting at some point. But yeah, it was around 900 hours.
And so, sorry, can you hear me all if I speak loud enough? Yeah? Yeah. Oh, well, maybe we'll do this. Okay, all right. Okay, we'll pass the mic back and forth. And here's another mic coming down here. Okay. But just to be able to be present, to capture the moments that you did, that's a lot of people hours, you know, that's a lot of filmmaking hours you put into it. How were you able to just be there all the time? Can you break that down a little bit for us? Oh, no. Technology.
Hello?
Here, use this one.
Sorry. You know, it starts with the term ending in April and being able to move to New York. But honestly, that's what I did. I moved my family. My daughter was 2 at the time. And we moved to New York and just sort of jumped right in, worked with an incredible cinematographer. Eventually, you know, I worked on it for about 5 months and then eventually brought in a co-director, in part because we realized that we just had to be in Staten Island all the time, and that wasn't going to be possible. But for the first 5 months, just literally moved to New York and started hanging out. And it's, you know, hanging out is a funny thing when you're filming, because on the one hand, there's a part of your brain that's thinking, oh, is this valuable? Is this useful? Should I have the camera on? You know, is this a waste of time? And on the other hand, it's also part of just developing trust and showing up. So this is you know, they decided to start this union in the wake of a loss in Bessemer, Alabama, and they did it, as you see in the film, completely independently with no support. And in some ways that meant that there was an opportunity for us just to do what no one else was doing, which was to take them seriously. You know, we just by being at the tent every day and eventually every night, we were telling, you know, Chris and Nat and Maddie and all of these folks that we believed in their struggle, and that was the crucial to building trust. You know, and nobody else was paying attention to them. Everybody else underestimated them. And also, again, for me, I was like, you know, there's a different version of this film, I guess, where we could talk more about the labor conditions and talk more about the global reach of Amazon and the supply chain and go to other sites. But I had this sort of gut feeling as a filmmaker that what was what I didn't yet understand that was worth exploring and maybe bringing to an audience was this question of what it's like to try to do something when everyone tells you it can't be done, and to do that with other people. And that doesn't like hang on a bunch of dramatic points. That's something that's just sort of a felt feeling, and it's really fragile. And we wanted to capture that what our organizing is really like, but also the ways in which it's hard and the kinds of ways in which it breaks down. You know, sometimes the enemy is obvious. It's the union buster in the union busting meeting, and sometimes the enemy is systemic. It's the ways in which class and race work as disorganizing forces, and that's a felt experience that required that we just be there with the camera on as much as possible all the time.
And that democratic process is it's messy and chaotic, and just the fact, like, when I was watching this for the second time, I felt that, like, oh, you could have ended the film at the moment when they're all partying, but you continue, and you continue to just show that this process is never ending. It's a constant struggle, and it's time immemorial. The people on the bottom it's a constant struggle.
Yeah, I mean, endings, as you know, endings are really hard, and I think because we had made this decision when we thought they were going to lose, we had made the decision not to end with the end of the election, and then when they won, I mean, we were. It was one of the most extraordinary moments of my life. I cried a lot. I couldn't. I was so happy for everyone and for myself to live in a world where this is possible, and but I did think this is a problem for my idea of how the film is going to work structurally, because I also don't. I think it's too easy to end with a victory. I mean, I think that if a film about organizing, I know too many real organizers and have been around organizing for too long to know that that's not an honest depiction of what struggle is like. And then, but then if you decide not to end with a victory, the question becomes, what is the ending? And that is something we spent a lot of time in the edit room figuring out. There was a version of this film that had a whole hour after the victory, and then that didn't work because that took us into a new film, So we decided on this kind of coda structure that would indicate that there are, that the movement is nonlinear, that organizing is secular, that organizing is hard and includes defeats, but is also everything. Like, I don't know. I think of the ending as still hopeful, even while being bittersweet, but it felt important to be honest about what the actual work is like.
Yeah, I appreciated that ending, and it felt like, given the current climate, given post-American election, that something like this is, it does feel hopeful that this kind of thing can continue in this world currently, and so I guess also just thinking of the 900 hours that you were dealing with, can you talk to us a little bit about what did you leave? You mentioned the extra hour. Yeah. I mean, were there characters that you followed, or participants? Sorry, I say characters. It's this filmmaking thing, but the participants you were following, did you have to leave some of them out? And
we didn't have to. I mean, there's a lot left out, obviously, but it's not that we cut sort of whole story threads or whole sort of people. I think it was more we had to make decisions about what amount of information is just enough. So there were a lot of conversations about how we set up this struggle. Do we as filmmakers need to provide a lot of context about why the NLRB is so hostile to unions? Why what has gone on with the mainstream unions over 40 years? Set up Amazon as a particular kind of company. And I think, again, the feeling is that we wanted to do that sort of work in the briefest of terms, because a little goes a long way, and that the heart of the film was just at the tent with this group of people, watching them work, and trying to feel, the beautiful thing about film is that it traffics not just in information, but in feeling, and part of the feeling we wanted to convey was exhaustion, was commitment, was vulnerability. I don't think in some ways it's not surprising that they're most unified until they get to the victory, and then this group of people sort of falls apart. right after the victory. And in fact, while we were editing the film, the Union had completely fallen apart and groups weren't speaking to each other. So it added an extra dimension of sort of us asking what our responsibility is as people who are narrating a story to the world. And the other part of this, is, of course, was that it was a huge news item. So we're making this film with all of this footage and all of this inside access while the New York Times is reporting two best friends take on Amazon and win. And Chris is going on the Trevor Noah show, and there's already a kind of hero myth that's being produced. So one of our commitments from an early, from the earliest days was that this was Chris is necessarily a leader during this struggle, and he's going to occupy a lot of space in the film as a result, but it is a collective struggle, and we didn't want to kind of reify the hero's journey that a lot of other media outlets were doing.
I appreciate that as well, certainly with the introduction of Natalie,
yeah.
and her role in the film, and seeing that kind of counter a little bit, and seeing that also maybe Smalls isn't the perfect kind of hero as well. Not all heroes are perfect to begin with.
No, and in fact, I think there was a lot of risk to that. So part of it, again, is like, what do we think what is our responsibility to say something true about what we've learned about this group of people? How do we ensure that we're not adding to their vulnerability by putting them in a film that's going to travel outside of us and outside of our world? And how do we acknowledge that there's hostile forces that want to weaponize any of the criticism, especially criticism against Chris? And Chris is a complicated person because we're all complicated people, and he's a flawed person like we all are. And in fact, I think that that's a beautiful thing about putting, acknowledging that in a film is to, it's also a reminder that, normal flawed people can take on big companies and win, can lead movements of struggle, can do heroic things. I think that's really important. But we also knew that any wrong move in our attempt to kind of do this narrative work could also result in a smear campaign. There was already an existing smear campaign that there are already racist tropes being leveled against Chris. So we had to be really careful about acknowledging and making space for some of the critique internally of him and his leadership, but without kind of reproducing already existing and easily weaponized stereotypes.
Yeah. I'm aware of the time. I think maybe we should open up to the audience. I'm sure there's so many great questions out there. I will add an aside that I think to encourage independent cinema, what I will do is take Smalls' take on the free weed technique, and we start bringing that to movie theaters and independent cinema and get people out. So anyway, yes, right there in the hoodie.
Hi, Brett, congratulations for the film. This is, watching it just brings a lot of emotions, and also frankly, I only watched the news when this happened, and I thought it was such a big victory moment. I couldn't believe that, this was entirely documented sort of in real time. I guess I have a question about portraying union schism, because almost all the good union film, fiction or otherwise, I've seen portray some degree of schism. And I understand it's very difficult, right? You do that too much. There's a French film I seen, En Guerre, at War. They try to bring the dirty realism through portraying, the entirety of it is portraying the union schism and trying to bring up the drama, right? And I felt you have this very interestingly balanced approach. In some cases, you have this very concrete, situated camera where you can feel the camera operators knowing that the scene is escalating, and in one scene we saw the camera just kind of spin around 360 degrees, kind of have that. But also at the end where there's another schism, I feel like you were doing some elisions, showing a scene or two, and then and to hop to the next thing. And I just wonder what you're thinking about, and also between those two approaches, editing table maybe. What's the thought? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thought was, We hope we don't fuck this up. I mean, it's not a science. You know, we had a very long edit. We had two very strong-willed directors, myself and my co-director Steve Mang. We had two other editors, and then other people in the team with opinions. But for the majority of the edit, there's 4 of us, and I think it was actually very useful. It's really useful to have editors. Editors come to footage without the kind of emotional baggage that one has when they're very close to their protagonists, when they've spent long nights at a tent late at, all of that stuff. And I think that we just had many, many conversations. And we made some decisions that feel very, very minor, but I think are, affect the overall feeling. So for example, we have this arc with Natalie where she starts out as a strong part of the union, she has a lot of discontent, and then she leaves the union. So we have a lot of footage of Natalie very, very angry. And I think I think this is true of a lot of us. When we're really angry, we have grievances and we don't feel like they're being heard, we start to amplify and amplify and amplify. And so a lot of our footage with her, she would express her outrage in terms that were very hyperbolic and would grasp onto the kind of language that's most available. So she would always call Chris corrupt. And so we just made a rule. We were like, to call a leader, to call a black leader, to call a union leader corrupt over-determines everything. It has too much baggage within a culture that has demonized unions in this way and has demonized people of color and strong leaders of color. And so let's just make a rule where we don't allow that word into the transcript of this film. And so making kinds of decisions like that, rules for ourselves, helped us trying to carve out a space for that discontent and that fissure, but in terms that I hope don't easily let us as audience members settle into, strong and decided opinions about who is right and who is wrong. I mean, we had a very long version of the "You're late" scene. We called it the "You're late" scene, and we had a long version. It was kind of played amazingly as like one long, intense fight scene, and it became a kind of a Rochester. What's that? What kind of test? Like like a litmus test. We'd show it to people, and people would be like, "Oh my God! Like Chris is totally yelling. Like Maddie's so right. Why is he yelling at her?" And we'd show it to other people and be like, "Chris is not yelling. And why did Maddie come late?" And so there's a way in which we have to be very careful about these things because, again, meaning has already been made outside of the sphere of this film. And so we just tried to point to things, but in an incomplete way that makes space for people to make us all know that we don't know the full picture. We have a sense we can recognize our own struggles in this portrait, but we're not going to come to sort of conclusive, positions on who's right or who's wrong or what an argument is about.
It works in that scene. I think both emotions come up in the way we interpret it. Yeah. Let's go to the back, the black hat, and we'll try to keep our questions maybe a little short and sweet.
Hi, thank you. Is it on? Okay. Hi, thank you for bringing the film. I was wondering if you could speak more to the ellipses in the film and what your responsibility was in moments where it seemed there was more danger, particularly during the arrest scene. And if you could also speak about the integration of the materials filmed by the workers and how you factor that into the edit.
Yeah, I'll start with the end, and I'll also try and be brief. So we made this decision at the very beginning of filming that we weren't going to ask Amazon for permission to film inside the warehouse. And for me, that comes out of a lot of experience making films and understanding that what gets called access is often brokered. To ask Amazon for permission to film inside required filming on their terms, and that would compromise any kind of statement that the footage could make. But that was also kind of a bummer because this is a film about work. It's a film about a workplace and workplace culture. And we have a lot of people talking about it, but we don't see it. And, you know, I'm thinking about the long history of labor films. You get to see the workplace. It's an important part of how the film's language works on an audience. And so one of the sort of lucky breaks we got as a film team came about just because of you know, COVID, which is that before COVID, before the pandemic, workers were not allowed to bring their cell phones into work. They had to put them in a locker. And it was only as a concession to workers who were dealing with sick family members and so on that they started to be allowed to bring in their phones and started doing this self-documentation. It was really important to the ALU to do this self-documentation. They had a really strong social media game. And so we treated them as collaborators. We never asked people to film for us, but we were very close to all of the organizers and seeing what they were posting online, and we licensed the footage from them as collaborators. You know, we had a small footprint. It was, you know, 1 or 2 of us on site at almost all times, and certainly there was never gonna be a moment, I think you see that in the tent, when the tent blows down, when we're gonna like prioritize the film over helping people. So, you know, and I think that was part of the trust too. We were there in solidarity with this struggle, and we believed it was important to document. I think that if things, you know, so there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes in terms of our attempt as a film team to also give support to people. Like we worked really hard with Natalie to try and find her housing. We did a lot of help with the fundraising and bail support and so on and so forth. And the arrest scene, you know, people were nervous, but Chris was very calm, and I think they wanted us to document. I mean, as many people as possible were documenting it, and it felt like the right thing to do during that scene. I forget if there was another part of the question, but I hope that mostly answers.
Over here in the back with the
Thanks. Great. You know, great. I had hoped to see this at Hot Docs, but it sold out. Like the both screenings went it. And I just 2 things, just reminders to all the people who maybe weren't able to get here of the download, the Black Friday download special, and you can pay it forward by buying a package for an Amazon worker. But I just did want to ask about distribution of documentaries. Why is it so hard to get them done and the audience? And in this case, maybe if there's a special thing of just Jeff Bezos, because it did say on the website theatrical release October 2024, and it just doesn't seem to have had broad theatrical release. And I also have to think of the contrast between Ken Loach's Sorry We Missed You, which is obviously about an Amazon subcontractor, but never names it, and is fictional. But, you know, and again, it's not a documentary, but what are the challenges you experience, and has Jeff Bezos sort of put a memo out to major theaters saying, don't you dare screen this?
I don't know if he's done that, but I will share one anecdote, which is that, you know, you see at the end of the film, there's a note that says, you know, Amazon, in the wake of the victory, Amazon files a series of 24 objections. So it filed these objections, and 4 of those objections were specifically about our film team, citing our team as like hired goons that were there to intimidate workers, which was kind of funny for us because we're wish we're, you know, we had that kind of muscle. But also, and then, you know, then the trial happened, like the hearings happened, and they're online, so we just got press accreditation so we could watch them. And at one point, Amazon's doofus lawyer like screen shares his screen, and there's like these open tabs on us as all the members of the film team and some of our funders. So we're like, oh, guess they know about us. Yeah, I mean, distribution is really hard. So what happened with this film is that it premiered at Sundance, which is a big deal for an independent film. We won a major award. It's played over 100 festivals. Like, by all usual metrics, the film has been a great success, which makes me very, very happy. But what didn't happen was the film didn't sell. That happens to a lot of films. You know, on the one hand, it's just that the marketplace is, you know, very narrow and commercial. But it was a surprise in our case. We were told there would be, a lot of possibilities for this film. It was a story people were paying attention to, and we, again, got an award out of Sundance, which is usually one of the metrics by which you can tell if a film is going to get distribution. And we were like really shut out. I mean, everybody said no. And I think it's a combination. I mean, I'm just speculating. I think it's a few things. One is that we have media consolidation across our entire field. So it's not just us, it's actually a lot of political films. Films that Netflix would have bought 5 years ago, they're saying outright, we don't do these films anymore. We don't do controversial films. We do, in their language, our buckets are...
Tinder swindler.
Oh, I was thinking
that.
of Brands Gone Bad.
Oh, yeah. Like that.
There's a few buckets, but not political films. And so there's that. We did also hear from some distributors that they have a relationship with Amazon Studios. Amazon is a company that dominates every single field, including the entertainment industry. So, and then I think there's also the fact that it's a labor film that takes on a tech company in an economy where most platforms for media are also tech companies. I mean, Netflix is a tech company, Hulu is a tech company. So I think that there's probably a few things going on that have made this film particularly threatening to the very few. There's even less and less buyers, and they're become more and more conservative. So we've taken things into our own hands and we've been self-distributing it. We did have a theatrical release across theaters, unfortunately not in Canada, but maybe someone wants to pick up the film. And we are doing a self-release on Black Friday so that we can get it out to workers and to organizers and to anyone who wants to see it. And we're still hopeful that maybe it'll get wider distribution. But in the meantime, we're just doing it ourselves to make sure people get to see it.
We got time for one more question, and I'm just trying to go across. Is there any question in this section of the room? No? That's okay. I'll go over here. You've had your hand up, sir, at the glasses. Yes. Oh.
Could you maybe speak a bit? Oh, I'm feeling some echo here. Sorry. Can you speak a bit about how you gained access? Maybe like you talk a bit about trust and access. So can you speak a bit about how you gain their trust and you? I don't know. You may speak about your point of contact and basically like how you gain trust, how you even able to get cameras in the first place.
Sure, and maybe we'll also just try and sneak that question in. So we'll get both of them at the same time.
Yeah, let's do that. I agree. Raise your hand again. Yes, thank you. Thanks, Brent.
I've heard you speak before, Brett, at Film Futura, which was a really amazing, radical film school in the summer, 2021. And I guess we really spoke about duties of care, and I really wanted to wonder, what duties of care did you have when you were making this film, and what were you negotiating throughout the process?
Okay, great. Thank you for both those questions. I mean, I think that they're related to each other. Trust is a funny thing because in some ways it's really simple. You gain people's trust when you respect them and you're honest with them. In this case, we weren't pushy. We didn't make demands. We were transparent about why we're there, what our own politics are. I think you can tell from the film, but I'm on the side of the workers. We are, all of us are, as a film team, and we were, that was the reason we approached this group of people. That's the reason we approached Chris at first, and then the whole ALU once they started to form this union drive. And when new people would come on board, we immediately introduced ourselves. We said who we are and why we're there, and we gave people the option to be on camera or not. So nobody's on camera against their will, and most people just got to know us really well because we were literally there all the time, and again, doing a lot of things behind the scenes that have nothing to do with the filmmaking, like doing solidarity work. And supporting the struggle in other ways. And I think that that's completely compatible with also making a document that is open enough for audiences to enter into and have their own relationship to. And I think the other thing about trust is sort of really being mindful and transparent about what risks might be involved in being in a film. And we showed the film to everybody before we finished it, and we gave folks an opportunity to tell us whether or not they felt that there was anything harmful on screen. And, you know, I think the kinds of feedback we got during this screening before film went public was things like Maddie feeling embarrassed that she had said the Teamsters aren't coming, because fast forward to this June, the Teamsters have now affiliated. The ALU is now affiliated with the Teamsters. The ALU is now Teamsters Local 1, JFK 8 Local 1. So Maddie, as a young organizer, is just sort of embarrassed that she had thought that and now thinks differently. And we talked it through, and she didn't ask us to take it out. And I think I just like have so much respect for these organizers for understanding that like some of the more uncomfortable moments are really important, like they're really empowering to audiences to see, and that people need to know that organizing is not glossy and easy. It's really hard and hurtful, and that people mess up and keep going. And so this relates, I think, to the duty of care. I mean, the duty of care for us was to say we will do no harm, and to be collaborative, which is not the same in my mind as saying, oh, you film subjects have veto power. I mean, we have part of taking responsibility for this work is to also say this is our perspective. This film is our vantage, and there are authors to this project. And if there's anything that comes, any harm that comes of this, that's on us, you know, or any. You know, the perspective is ours, and we are fallible as well. But certainly do no harm, and that requires a kind of just sort of a way of working that's about checking in, being collaborative, getting a lot of seasoned organizers to watch cuts of the film and to talk us through our own biases or misgivings. And then now that it's out, to try and get it out in a way that also lets it have multiple kinds of lives.
Before we wrap up, are there any other updates about any of the participants? And
yeah, so a couple of updates. So affiliated with the Teamsters, no first contract yet. New elections. So Chris did not run for president during new elections. There was actually a reform slate, which is made up of a lot of the folks in this. So as we were making the film, the union is fighting. There were two sort of camps, and a reform slate got composed. And they ran in new elections just this past summer, and Connor Spence, who is one of the guys in the film, you see him on election day on the phone with the lawyer. He's now the president of the ALU, which is really great for the ALU. And I think it's really great that the Teamsters have come around too, because, you know, I think this is worker-to-worker organizing, and these workers did something that the big unions thought was impossible, and they really showed them up in a really important way. But they don't have the resources to take this to contract. That, you know, they need to be strike ready, and it's really hard to be an independent union that's strike ready. So the Teamsters have a strike fund. They can mobilize across multiple geographies and get to this union to the point where they can leverage real power and bring their employer to the bargaining table. So stay tuned.
On that note, I'd be remiss not to ask if you've got something else cooking, another project.
Yeah. I've got an archival film that will require no shooting, no driving to Staten Island late at night ever again. Thank God. I'm making I'm currently at work on an all-archival film about the cultural Cold War and the art critic John Berger and the role of the arts in
spicy
in political warfare.
Yeah. And just how can we get the word out to see your film, and what can we do to help, and anything else? I mentioned the Black Friday.
So go to our website, unionthefilm.com. It'll take you to a place where you can rent it through this website called Gather for a limited release, 5 days instead of buying from Amazon. But also we list a bunch of screenings. You can request a screening, community screening, worker screenings. It's going to be playing at Hot Docs in January. If you think more people want to come, write to Hot Docs and suggest they play it for more than one night. Lots of things you can do. So, unionthefilm.com.
Thanks, Brett. Thank you for your candidness. And
Thank you.
audience, for coming out. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.